Before steel furnaces, before insulation was a word, the people of the northeastern woodlands faced a killer winter. For 6 months each year, temperatures plunged below freezing. Snow buried the world in drifts taller than a man. The forest went silent. Food became memory. This wasn't discomfort. This was a test of survival measured in hours. Lose your fire, lose your shelter, and the cold would take you before dawn. Yet the Haudenosaunee and their neighbors didn't just endure these winters. They thrived. They raised families, told stories, built nations, all inside a structure so ingeniously designed it would become the architectural foundation of an entire political system. The Longhouse wasn't a primitive hut. It was a thermal engineering achievement that captured fire, human warmth, and forest materials in a single integrated system. And it worked so well for so long that it became more than shelter. It became a civilization. The Northeast woodlands, before European contact, presented a survival problem of brutal clarity. From November through March, the region that today encompasses New York, southern Ontario, and Quebec transformed into a frozen expanse. Average winter temperatures dropped to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, often far lower. Wind came screaming across the Great Lakes with nothing to stop it. Snow fell in relentless waves, accumulating to depths of 3, 4, sometimes 5 feet. This snow wasn't inconvenience. It was isolation. Hunting became dangerous and often futile, travel reduced to a crawl. The forest that provided everything during abundant months offered almost nothing now. Food became the problem within the problem. The hungry months stretched from when stored crops began to dwindle until the first spring plants emerged. When families lived on what they had preserved, dried corn, beans, squash, smoked fish, and game. Rations had to last. Miscalculation meant starvation, but the cold was the immediate threat. Hypothermia doesn't wait for starvation. Exposed to freezing temperatures and wind, the human body begins shutting down within hours. Fingers and toes go numb. Shivering becomes violent, then stops. A sign the core temperature has dropped to dangerous levels. Confusion sets in, then unconsciousness, then death. A shelter in this environment couldn't be adequate. It had to be absolute. It had to hold heat against a world designed to steal it. It had to function continuously, day and night, for months without failure. The peoples of this region, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and neighboring nations, faced this challenge with nothing but stone tools, fire, and the materials the forest provided. No metal, no manufactured insulation, no glass. The question wasn't how to hide from winter. It was how to engineer a pocket of warmth that could sustain not just one person, but entire extended families. How to create summer inside winter using only wood, bark, and fire. Their answer was the Longhouse. And understanding how it worked requires understanding that every element, from its curved roof to its central corridor of hearths to the number of people sleeping inside, was part of a single, sophisticated thermal system designed to do one thing: keep humans alive when the world outside was designed to kill them. The Longhouse structure began with a deceptively simple premise: shape determines survival. The form was long and narrow, stretching anywhere from 60 to 200 feet in length, but only 20 to 25 feet wide. The roof arched in a gentle semi-cylinder, rising 15 to 20 feet at its peak. From a distance, it resembled a massive overturned canoe settled into the earth. This wasn't aesthetic choice, it was physics. The curved profile presented minimal resistance to wind. Winter gales, which could tear apart a flat-walled structure or rip away a peaked roof, flowed over the rounded surface like water over a stone. The shape deflected force rather than absorbing it. Stress distributed evenly across the arched frame instead of concentrating at corners and edges. Snow accumulated on the roof, but the curve ensured it slid off before dangerous weight built up. A flat or sharply peaked roof would trap heavy loads. The Longhouse's gentle arc shed them naturally. The frame rose from the ground itself. Builders drove young saplings, elm, hickory, ash, into the earth in 2 parallel rows. These poles, each 3 to 4 inches thick, were then bent inward and lashed together at the top, forming a series of ribs. Horizontal poles ran the length of the structure, binding the ribs into a unified skeleton. The exterior cladding came from elm bark, harvested in late spring when sap flow made it pliable. Sections were cut from living trees in large sheets, sometimes 6 feet long and 4 feet wide. These were flattened, dried, and then overlapped across the frame like enormous shingles, and saplings lashed horizontally over the bark held everything in place. The result was a weatherproof skin with a hidden property. The overlapping layers trapped air between them. That trapped air became insulation, thousands of small pockets that slowed heat transfer from inside to out. But the most critical design decision had nothing to do with materials or shape. It was about density. A longhouse didn't shelter one family. It housed an entire clan, often 50 to 80 people, sometimes more. The structure was divided internally into family compartments along both sides, but all shared the same enclosed space, the same air, the same heat sources. This wasn't communal living for social reasons alone. It was thermal efficiency at architectural scale. Consider the mathematics of heat loss. A small dwelling housing one family has high surface area relative to its occupants. Every square foot of exterior wall, floor, and roof bleeds warmth into the frozen air outside. The ratio of heat loss to inhabitants is terrible. The longhouse inverted that ratio. By bringing dozens of people under one roof, the exterior surface area per person dropped dramatically. The volume of interior air and the heat it contained increased while the heat-losing boundary remained proportionally small. Animals cluster together in cold because grouped bodies lose heat more slowly than isolated ones. The longhouse made that strategy structural. It transformed thermal physics into built form. The forest provided every component. The design provided the logic. But the true genius was recognizing that the shelter itself wasn't enough. The longhouse was only the container. What happened inside, how heat was generated, distributed, retained, and controlled, was where the system revealed its sophistication. The longhouse heating system wasn't a single technology. It was an engineered environment built from interlocking layers, each addressing a specific thermal problem. Start with the walls. The elm bark shingles weren't just weatherproofing. They were insulation architecture. Each sheet overlapped the one below it, creating a shingled surface that shed rain and snowmelt. But between those overlapping layers, air became trapped in thin pockets. Air, when still, is one of nature's best insulators. It conducts heat poorly. The bark and air sandwich slowed the transfer of warmth from the interior to the frozen exterior. Heat couldn't bleed through solid material. It had to cross multiple barriers of trapped air first. The thickness of the walls mattered less than their layered structure. A single thick piece of bark would conduct heat. But multiple thin layers separated by air gaps created resistance. This was passive insulation. It required no maintenance, no adjustment. It simply worked continuously for the entire winter. Now the heat source, the central corridor. Down the length of the longhouse ran a wide aisle, open from end to end. Along this corridor, hearths were spaced at regular intervals, typically one fire every 20 feet. Each hearth was shared between 2 families occupying compartments on opposite sides. This wasn't one massive bonfire. It was a distributed heating system. A single large fire generates intense heat close to the flame but fails to warm distant areas effectively. Heat radiates outward, but dissipates quickly with distance. A lone fire in a 100-foot structure would leave the ends freezing while the center roasted. The chain of smaller hearths solved this. Each fire heated its immediate zone. Together, they created overlapping heat fields that covered the entire length of the structure. Radiant heat spread outward from each hearth to the family compartments on either side. Convective heat, rising warm air, circulated upward and along the roof, distributing warmth through the upper air layers. The fires never went out. Maintaining them was constant work, but it was distributed work. Each family tended their section of the corridor. Fuel was added gradually. Coals were banked at night to preserve heat with minimal smoke, but smoke was the problem within the solution. Burn wood indoors and smoke accumulates. Breathe enough smoke and you suffocate before you freeze. The longhouse required ventilation, but opening vents meant losing heat. But the solution was adjustable smoke holes. Directly above each hearth, a rectangular opening was cut through the roof. These weren't simple gaps. Each could be partially covered or angled using a piece of bark attached to a long pole. From inside, someone could shift the cover to adjust the opening's size and direction. Wind direction dictated adjustment. If wind blew from the east, the smoke hole on the west side could be opened wider, creating draw. The eastern holes could be partially closed to prevent downdrafts. The system required attention. Someone had to monitor wind and adjust accordingly, but it allowed smoke to escape while minimizing heat loss. The rising hot air from the fires created natural draft. Smoke rose toward the roof and out through the vents. Cold air entered through the doorways, but that incoming air was immediately warmed by the nearest hearth. The circulation was continuous. Cold air in, warmed by fire, rose, exited as smoke. This wasn't accidental airflow, it was managed convection. The doorways themselves were thermal barriers. Entrances were small, low, and covered. A person entering had to stoop, often pushing aside a heavy hide flap. Many longhouses included a small vestibule or baffle, a short, enclosed entrance corridor that prevented wind from blowing directly into the living space. This was an airlock in primitive form. The vestibule created a buffer zone. Cold air entering the outer door mixed and slowed in the small chamber before reaching the inner door. Wind couldn't blast straight through. The temperature transition was staged. The low height mattered too. Warm air rises, which by keeping the entrance below the level of the warmest air, the doorway minimized the loss of the heat layer that accumulated near the roof. Cold air, being denser, stayed low and was immediately drawn toward the nearest hearth. Every element worked in concert. The insulated bark walls held heat inside. The distributed hearths generated warmth along the entire length. The adjustable roof vents expelled smoke without creating massive drafts. The baffled doorways prevented cold air from flooding the interior. None of these features worked in isolation. Remove one and the system degraded. The longhouse heating mechanism was a machine built from wood and fire, maintained by human attention and governed by the physics of heat, air, and combustion. The architecture created the container, the fires provided the heat, but the longhouse system had another component, one that couldn't be built or tended: the people themselves. 50 bodies, 80 bodies, sometimes more. Each one a biological furnace generating approximately 100 watts of heat at rest, more during activity. In the enclosed, insulated volume of the longhouse, that collective output was significant. Consider the mathematics. 60 people produce roughly 6,000 watts of continuous heat, equivalent to 6 electric space heaters running simultaneously. This wasn't supplemental warmth, it was a primary heat source, constant and free, generated simply by human metabolism, converting food into energy. The longhouse was designed to capture it. The insulated walls that kept external cold out also kept internal heat in. And the body heat of dozens of people mixed with the warmth from the hearths, raising the ambient temperature of the entire interior. The air itself became a shared thermal resource, warmed by fire and flesh alike. But heat stratifies. Warm air rises, cold air sinks. Life was lived above the floor. Along both sides of the longhouse, raised platforms ran the entire length, built at 2 levels. The lower platforms sat roughly 2 feet off the ground. The upper platforms, used primarily for sleeping and storage, rose another 4 feet above that. These weren't furniture, they were thermal zones. The packed earth floor was the coldest part of the structure. Cold air settled there, drawn by gravity. Anyone sleeping on the ground would spend the night in the lowest, coldest air layer, losing body heat to the frozen earth beneath. Thus, the platforms lifted people into warmer strata. At 2 feet, the air temperature was noticeably higher. At 6 feet, near the upper sleeping platforms, the air captured the full benefit of rising heat from the hearths below. The platforms also created workflow efficiency. The lower level served as workspace, places to sit while processing food, repairing tools, or tending children. The upper level was for rest. This vertical organization matched thermal reality. Work areas occupied moderate temperatures. Sleep areas captured maximum warmth. Storage went highest of all. Dried foods, seeds, and tools hung from the rafters or rested on the uppermost platforms, benefiting from the driest, warmest air near the roof. This prevented mold and degradation during the humid, smoke-filled months of constant occupation. The central corridor was constant activity. Cooking happened over the shared hearths. Corn was ground. Hides were worked. Tools were repaired. Children played. Elders told stories. Every action generated heat or occurred near heat sources. Cooking fires released thermal energy into food and air alike. The labor of tool-making and hide-working produced body heat from exertion. Even storytelling gathered people near the hearths, their clustered bodies adding to the localized warmth. The longhouse wasn't divided into private, heated rooms. It was one unified thermal system. Heat generated anywhere contributed to the total. A fire lit for cooking warmed nearby sleepers. But body heat from a family on the east end mixed into the air that circulated to the west end. Nothing was wasted. Fuel efficiency emerged from shared resources. Two families sharing one hearth used far less wood than two families burning separate fires. Firewood had to be gathered, dried, and stored before winter. The less fuel required per person, the less labor demanded during autumn preparation, and the longer stores lasted through the hungry months. The longhouse transformed human proximity into engineering advantage. Communal living wasn't just social structure, it was thermodynamic strategy. Every person added heat, every shared fire reduced waste, every raised platform positioned bodies in warmer air. At night, when the fires were banked to coals and smoke thinned, the interior temperature dropped, but not to exterior levels. The insulated shell, the residual heat from banked coals, and the collective warmth of dozens of sleeping bodies kept the air inside survivable. Cold, perhaps, uncomfortable by modern standards, but survivable, always survivable. The longhouse was warmed by fire and by life itself. The longhouse solved winter, but it did something more. It became the foundation of a political philosophy so enduring that it governed nations for centuries and still shapes identity today. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the union of the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca nations, conceived their entire alliance as a longhouse stretched across the land. They called themselves the people of the longhouse. This wasn't metaphor for convenience. It was structural political thought translated directly from the architecture that kept them alive. Consider what the longhouse actually was. Separate families maintaining individual fires under one protective roof. Each family had autonomy over their hearth, their space, their daily decisions. But they shared walls, they shared the corridor, and they shared the warmth that kept everyone breathing through winter. The Confederacy worked identically. 5 sovereign nations, each governing their own territory, each maintaining their own council fire, but unified under one symbolic roof for mutual protection and collective survival. The Mohawk were the keepers of the eastern door. The Seneca held the western door. The Onondaga, positioned centrally, tended the sacred council fire, the political equivalent of the hearth that warmed all sides. This wasn't coincidence. The longhouse taught a lesson that became law. You could maintain identity while sharing structure. You could keep your own fire while benefiting from communal warmth. Strength came not from isolation, but from coordinated coexistence under common protection. The heating system was the proof. But no single family could survive winter alone as efficiently as the clan could together. The distributed hearths, the shared air, the collective body heat, these weren't compromises. They were force multipliers. Cooperation wasn't idealism. It was thermodynamics. That understanding became governance. Disputes between nations were resolved through council, not war, because war was as wasteful as each family burning separate fires. Decisions required consensus because the system only worked when all parts functioned together. The Longhouse wasn't just where this political structure was conceived. It was the operating principle made visible. The genius wasn't architectural alone. It was the recognition that the most sophisticated technology harmonizes with both nature and human nature. The Longhouse used materials the forest provided, and it captured heat physics demanded, and it organized people the way survival required, together, coordinated, mutually dependent. The structure still stands in memory and practice. Modern Haudenosaunee governance still references the Longhouse framework. The Confederacy's influence reached the architects of early American democracy, who studied its federal structure of sovereign units under united protection. A heating system became a civilization because the people who built it understood something fundamental. The problems of survival and the problems of society have the same solution: shared space, distributed responsibility, heat that benefits everyone because everyone contributes to generating it. The Longhouse wasn't primitive. It was integration of physics, ecology, social engineering, and political thought into a single structure that worked perfectly for its environment and the humans within it. That's not survival, that's mastery.